You said something last week while I was gone that if I had been here, I think I would have taken some umbrage with. And that is your defense of the 15 picks that Geno threw this year. And kind of going through them, and these 5 are because of this, and these 2 are because of DK. It reminded me of when Jerry Seinfeld got stuck in Florida with his parents in a lane.
5 more days.
Well, today's almost over, and weekdays always go by fast, and Friday we're leaving. It's like 2 days, really. It's like a cup of coffee. You don't go by like that.
Yeah, I mean, these 8 don't count, and these 4 weren't really his fault, and these 2, like, it was really like 2 picks. He was just fine. It was like 2 picks. 2 picks. Who does no pick? 2 picks. When did you become the big excuse maker?
Wow, that was such an exaggeration. I mean, goodness gracious. Talk about false equivocation. I mean, that is textbook definition right there. No, look, I think there's quarterbacks that earn more of those than others. And so I always do this, though, when this is the topic turns to turnovers, is I think that has forever been something that's frustrated to me, and maybe that's the quarterback side of me, but it's that those are universally accepted as a quarterback stat on interceptions, and it's not necessarily always the case. Now, he did not play clean, and some of those, I mean, if you wanted to put a point system on him in terms of costly interceptions and red zone interceptions on some of those decisions, then, yeah, those carry more weight than others. So I'm not saying he was perfect in terms of ball security. I'm saying that there's blood on more than his hands with those. That
I understand, and obviously I am exaggerating here quite a bit. But
it was 8 that he forced. But it was 4 that were tipped. It was 2 that were on DK, and one that he got hit. Yes.
But here's the real question, and this is what I actually would have asked you: how different is that than anyone else in the league, and how much are those balanced out by dropped interceptions and other throws that are sort of in that category? I get that not all of them are his fault. I would just assume if you went down Baker Mayfield's 15, you'd get the same, or 16. If you went down Kirk Cousins' 16, you get the sum of the same, and that's sort of true for everybody.
Well, I think look, it varies from year to year. It's to some extent, yeah. Not every interception is going to be on the quarterback, but I thought in doing this for a long time, that seemed like a pretty large number of his that weren't on him. So, and I would guess if you found most guys who throw a ton of them, that you'll have more, reasons for those just because of the sheer volume of it. Now, I say that. Can he play cleaner? Sure. I mean, I do the Charger games. Justin Herbert's got 3 picks this year. Justin Herbert is protected the football as well as any quarterback that I've ever been around in the way he's played this year. And that is true? Not.
Justin Herbert has 3 picks.
Yeah, he's got like 23-3.
That's insane.
Yeah. And it's not like, watching him every week, it's not like this is check down Charlie, who's not willing to put the ball in jeopardy. Like, he puts the ball in some tight windows now. He's been very smart with how he's taking care of the football.
I got to tell you, that is a truly shocking number.
I think they have 8 turnovers. I think they have maybe 7 or 8 turnovers on the season as a team.
Well, especially when you go back and think about Dan Marino, right? And all like throwing as a 23, 22, like every year he was at least in the teens and up in the. He's one of the best quarterbacks of all time. 3. Is really amazing.
It's such a different game, though, from those years. I always every year when the Hall of Fame stuff comes around, it seems like there's the Troy Aikman pinata that people like to go compare his statistics to, the statistics of the players now. I'm like, guys, this is it's not even the same sport with how they played back then and what was allowed and what wasn't allowed, and the offensive systems that they were running. It's just so different.
Hey, DJ, when you are a scout, I know so much of it is what you have to do to project ahead to get the new personnel and the transaction, wired and through the draft and everything else. But in those days, were you guys also asked to look back? Were you asked to look at the season? Did you watch the team overall through the course of the season and have to give kind of an evaluation on the 2024 Seahawks as a scout?
We would keep up with it as we would go somewhat on our own. A lot of it, if you're an area scout or you're on the college scouting side of things, it wasn't assigned, which I think you bring up a great point. It should be, because we study the roster before we leave camp. You come into training camp as road scouts, and they give you a position, and you study that position and evaluate your roster before you head out. But I think we could do a much better job of looking back, evaluating what you saw at that point in time, what went right, what went wrong. I think it's very, very helpful. I always would do it just off of the guys that I had graded. So if I was the national over-the-top scout with my years in Cleveland, that's keeping your arms around pretty much the whole league to see, okay, this went better or worse than I anticipated based off my evaluation. What can I learn from that? I always found that very helpful. There was the immediate study that I would do personally, and then there was also the 3-year down the road study, which is like one of those summer months where you're kind of off and you've got some time on your hands. I would take the draft from 3 years prior, and it was very simple. I have it in an Excel sheet, and it was simply I would highlight it in green for evaluation that I thought was close enough, and then I would highlight it in red for one that said I totally whiffed on this one. And then you have it sorted by position, and you could literally find some key words that would show up in all the guys that you've missed. That was how I learned the lesson on offensive linemen was I'm overvaluing their athleticism, and I'm undervaluing the intelligence, toughness component of it. Because I'd be like, oh, this guy, I don't love this player. He's so stiff, but he's smart and he's tough, and he started 40 games in the Big Ten. And it was like, okay, well, those guys play in the NFL, even with some of those limitations. Whereas the other guy, I'm like, well, yeah, he's got some mental errors, and he's got some technique stuff to clean up. But what an athlete! He is long and athletic, and guess what? That guy struggles. So those are good ways to kind of learn some scouting lessons.
Okay, so put a little green and red around the 10-7 Seahawks season.
Ooh. Well, I'm especially on the whole, obviously. Gosh, I mean, Jackson Smith and Jigba gets a definite green. Being excited about him taking the next step. I think that's a major takeaway from this team for this season. I think the growth of the defense in terms of the pieces as they fell in pace, I sure hope has Ernest Jones said anything? Has the team said anything about wanting to extend him?
Oh yeah, they had a pause that came up the couple days before the final game, and there was a report that the two sides had paused. Ernest was asked a lot about it after the game and said, hey.
I got a little from him. Here was Ernest Jones actually with our afternoon show, Wyman and Bob, on Monday.
Yes, I'm feeling pretty confident here. I think both sides, want to get something done. We just got to come to a mutual agreement, and, and whatever those numbers or whatever those situations or whatever that may be, that's what that's going to be. But, I think both sides are, working towards that, and I think it will.
I hope so. I mean, talk about making a difference. We talked about it before the trade was, right when the trade was made, what the hope of what that would look like, and I think it met or maybe even exceeded
expectations. You would prioritize that, DJ? You would prioritize that middle linebacker spot?
I would, especially in this scheme with this defense and, the importance of it. I would. And then, I don't know, it's going to have to break the bank just because the market for off-the-ball linebackers is not great in terms of the financial commitment. So I would start there. Gosh, Leonard Williams would be in green, going back to the previous discussion with what you saw from him. That's a true, building block warrior. Did he really not make the Pro Bowl, by the way?
Didn't make the Pro Bowl. It's absurd. He had 11 sacks. Did not make the Pro Bowl. Vita Vea, kid out of Philadelphia, Jalen Carter, and
I like Jalen Carter, but he had a much better year than Jalen Carter.
Yeah, not close.
And then on the red side of things, and we've been beating this drum, I think you got to figure out the interior of the offensive line. I think I would love to see a big time tight end and and maybe some new blood at receiver just to throw in there as well, some more weapons. I like the combination of running back. I know I haven't looked at the end of the year stats, but because of injuries and divvying up carries, I'm sure that Charbonnet or Walker don't have big time numbers, but I do like the collection they have there.
Interesting that Charbonnet averaged about a half yard more per carry than Walker. Kenny McIntosh in limited duty averaged about 1.5 more yards per carry than Ken Walker. I said before this season there should be at least more of an open competition. Do you think that there'll be even more of that next year?
I think that's fair. I think that you've got multiple backs. You're kind of in the committee mode. I don't think that anybody has a priority. I think it's how you ride the hot hand at that point in time with what you have. I've always struggled with this because Pittsburgh's a great example. I've watched Pittsburgh the last 2-3 years, and I'm like, Jaylen Warren brings so much more to the table than Najee Harris. Najee Harris is a first-round pick, and Najee Harris, all the prototypes in Alabama, all that stuff. You just watch tape, like, how do you not give Jaylen Warren more touches? He does more with the touches you give him than Najee Harris does with it. So I think you have to, I think you have to keep your eyes open on those things, and it's a hot hand situation.
Well, and some of that will depend on what kind of scheme they're running next year in the running game and in the offense in general. Let's ask you the easy question: why isn't Ryan Grubb here? And I guess the follow-up will be, who do you think would and should be?
I didn't think he did a terrible job. I mean, I think you got to allow for an adjustment period there. I thought there would be staff changes, maybe just offensive line and maybe a couple changes there. But it looks to me from the outside that this is just, it's not successful, unsuccessful. This is not the vision that I have for what this offense is supposed to look like. And making the decision after 1 year to say this is not how we complement, what we want to do on defense. It would lend, and Brock was texting me about this a little bit offline. It would lend itself to the pretty obvious conclusion that they want somebody who can come in and run the football and be a little bit more physical team, which usually is what a defensive-minded head coach is looking for, is something on offense to be able to balance out what we want to do on defense and take a little off there.
Yeah, I think you'll like this cut. Mike McDonald asked about that yesterday. Of all the conversation, this one I think cuts to the most truth of it, DJ. This was McDonald talking about what he's looking for in that next coordinator.
Look, it's not like we weren't together on this thing the whole ride of the way. We just decided it was the right decision to make, and there's some specifics that I'll leave that to Ryan and I's conversations today and throughout the season. But we want to mirror our football team. All the things we've been talking about isn't that we weren't doing these things on offense throughout the year. We've done a lot of great things, but we want our offense to be a physical unit and dictate terms of the defense and play complementary football and get the ball to our playmakers frequently and in space and let our quarterback play fast. So we're doing a lot of those things offensively. Just decided to go in a different direction.
So basically, they're doing what is you get to watch every single weekend. I mean, is that not Jim Harbaugh football? All right, and that's where he came from, the Harbaugh tree and everything else. You run, you're physical, you strain, you impose your will, you play pass off of it, let your quarterback play fast, not have to put everything on him, even though your guy is unbelievably talented. Is that not exactly what you watch week in and week out, DJ?
Yeah, and I think it also goes back to the turnover discussion that we had at the top, which is, maybe being a little bit more conservative in terms of protecting the football, making teams have to drive the distance against your defense. That's Jim Harbaugh football. Now, I think people kind of lump Jim and John together. I think, obviously, with Lamar Jackson's presence in Baltimore, that spices it up a little bit there. But if you're going to look and roll with Geno going forward, I think it's a little easier to emulate what's going on with the Chargers than it is trying to emulate anything that they're doing in Baltimore. That's a pretty unique setup with him. So, but yeah, I'll be curious to see, if you start hearing language like offensive linemen are weapons, then you'll know you've made the full conversion and you've joined the Harbaugh revolution.
Are there Harbaugh style offensive coordinators out there that would be a good fit?
That was a text that Brock sent me, and by the way, I feel like Brock just does so much more advanced work on these conversations. This is what I'm getting at here. The questions that Salk asked me, Brock's asked me 4 days ago.
Oh, jeez.
But do
you want me to start texting you what I have to say?
No,
you may not want that. I can do that if you want. I don't think that's what you want.
It's kind of like the Chargers staff is like a hodgepodge. Is amalgamation? Is that a word?
An amalgamation.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good word. App State. So I just don't know that there's anybody that's like an heir apparent. Like if I look at if Greg Roman got a head coaching job tomorrow, who would be the heir apparent who would run this exact same scheme on the staff? I don't know that there necessarily is one. So
Brock mentioned David Shaw. I thought that was at least an interesting name. Do you think that would be a fit?
Yeah. No, that's an interesting one, and I hadn't even thought about that. I don't know if Coach would be down for that, if he'd want to come back in that capacity. And he's working in the front office with Denver right now, and was optimistic there'd be a head coaching opportunity at some point in time. But that might be the avenue. You want to be a head coach in the NFL. You take a coordinator's job, have some success on a team that's literally on the doorstep of doing some cool things, push him over the top, and with his track record as a head coach record-wise, I would think that would lend itself to getting him an opportunity. Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that. And I need to check in with Coach. I haven't talked to him in a while.
Why don't you check in with him, and we'll ask you about that next week. But before we do, every single
you
week,
will, Brock. Brock, you will. Salk will ask me the following week. Yeah.
You know what? Let me text.
If
I'll
I'm
text
here.
Coach Shaw during the break. I think I got his number in my cell phone still. So let me text the old ball coach. Every week we try to ask you this question maybe in a little different way, and this would be about Geno Smith. So let me frame it this way. Because Mike McDonald said pretty specifically yesterday that this will be outside of his pay grade, right? That he loves Geno. He'd love to have Geno back. He's tip of the spear. He's all those things. But for right now, like, this is going to be bigger than Mike McDonald, obviously. And we know that because of the contract. If John Schneider said, hey, DJ, can I fly you in as a consultant this week? Can you just spend a day with us in our building? And can we walk through what you would, as a consultant, advise us on the very next steps for Geno Smith? What would it be?
Whew. It's not cut and dry. It's not easy, but I would, I would talk about two options of writing it out here, presenting him with a team-friendly, conservative contract that he's probably going to turn down and hate. But I would lend more towards year to year, as opposed to letting a number that I was uncomfortable with get out there. And
so he's got one more year. Would you let next year just ride?
I would give him the option. Hey, I don't want to be in a lame duck year. I don't feel committed to. Well, we're going to present you with a commitment, but it's going to be a little bit more on our terms in terms of the numbers that he's probably not going to like. But at least as a team at that point in time, you can say we presented him with an extension. He did not feel like that was a fair number, so now we can ride it out on this final year. I think that's a pretty smooth way to get through it, where organizationally you cover yourself, and then he can have the feeling of not being a lame duck. At least they offered me something of an extension here, so there was there was some willingness to commit.
Does that leave you in a good spot, though? I mean, so let's say you do that, and you ride it out. You spend one more year with Geno. You're probably going to win 10 games again, somewhere in that range. I mean, maybe things go crazy, and you win 13, and you're better than expected. That would be awesome, and you find yourself one of the contenders. But I would guess, based on the history, that you're going to win roughly 10 games, 11 games. Maybe you make the playoffs, and maybe you win one game, but likely not. Are you in any better position than next year to try to get the guy who's going to replace Geno Smith?
Well, I can tell you, as someone who's clicked over into draft mode and who is talking to general managers and teams that are picking up there in the top 10, that if there's upgrades over Geno Smith that are out there, they would like to know where they are.
Well, absolutely, I agree. They're probably not there this off season.
That's what I'm saying.
But if you're in the business of setting yourself up for the following season, we had Matt Miller on yesterday, one of your peers in that business, and he was raving about the 26 class, certainly over the 25 class. Does it make sense to be good, not great, but also not terrible?
Oh, so your point is I think there's too much talent on the team to
I agree.
Unintentionally run to the bottom.
I'm not trying to run to the bottom. I'm going to give you two other options other than Geno. One, let Geno go or trade Geno and trade for J.J. McCarthy. He would be the number one pick if he were in this draft, and try to make it work with J.J. and a veteran quarterback next year. Two,
I think if they're going to – I'm going to cut you off on one. If they're going to trade J.J. McCarthy, which I think in some ways it will depend on how they do in the postseason, starting with this game against the Rams. If Sam follows up a dud with a dud, then I don't think they'd be in quite as much a hurry to run J.J. out of there. If they make a little bit of a run, I think then you have all the confidence in the world. Sam's your guy. You commit to him. You make J.J. available. If they make J.J. available, JJ will be he will be on a team that's picking much higher than the Seattle Seahawks, because there will be more than a few of them that would be willing to part with said pick for JJ McCarthy.
The other option would be, and again, this one's risk. I don't know how risk averse you are in general, but you let Geno go or trade Geno. You bring in someone like Justin Fields, Daniel Jones. I even mentioned Zach Wilson, someone along those lines, who is a reclamation project. You hope that it works out in the same way that it did with Sam Darnold this past year. If it does, great. You got your guy on much less money. And if it doesn't, then you find yourself in the position that you were just talking about to draft your next guy. And it looks a lot like what the Seahawks did when they brought in Tavares Jackson right after they let Matt Hasselbeck go.
Yeah, it's so hard to position yourself in these drafts. Even if we say next year is going to be a great quarterback year, and I haven't gotten to that place yet. What are we talking about here? Like, that last year was so rare. We had 6 of the top 13 picks were quarterbacks. That doesn't happen. Like, a great quarterback draft is going to have 3. And there's just no guarantees. If it's Zach Wilson is your quarterback, whoever else is your quarterback, look at how bad some of these teams were this year. Like, there's more competition at the bottom than there is at the top. So I just think you're a 10-win team. You're a whisker away from being in the postseason. Like, and I know we want to think long-term and what's the answer going to be, what's the resolution. I think that's kind of, I don't know that's necessarily fair to the group you have right now, that I think with the right coordinator hire, this is potentially a 12-win team next year. I don't know that I'm ready to just punt on that. With the hopes that somehow I'm going to outsuck the rest of these teams when there seems to be a lot of competition in that world.
Hey, last thing here quickly, since you've clicked a little bit into draft mode, and we can do that maybe the next couple, you mentioned to us last week when you were in, Salk wasn't, that you can fix this interior of the O-line in a hurry. Is this draft class guard to guard have some dudes that can help fix this thing in the first, second, third round?
Yeah, I'm working through them. I'm working through. Actually, watched Drew Aller last night, which was kind of fun. But I haven't done the interior lineman yet. I've talked to several people that have said there's good depth in there, and that is second through fourth rounds. You can find guys. So I've got to get all the Senior Bowl guys done before I get to Mobile here at the end of the month. And you'll be shocked knowing my background that I like to save the interior offensive lineman towards the end of that process.
You save the best for last,
They're
obviously,
weapons.
right?
Oh, yeah.
DJ, they're
I
weapons.
just want to save the best for last.
When are you going to
It's a little
learn that
dessert.
offensive linemen are weapons?
I know. I've been trained. I've been trained here over this last year.
Buy in.
By the way, have you called any Drew Aller games, Brock?
I did last year. Intriguing dude, man. Intriguing dude.
I kind of watched it. It's one of those things that's weird about scouting, is that when you casually watch somebody on television, and I'm like, okay, he's a little bit I think he's a little careless in some of the stuff. It just kind of stuck in my head, and I don't know if he can move. And then I watched it last night. I just watched UCLA USC. He makes probably 8 throws in those 2 games that are ridiculous, like incredible throws. And then USC, it's 4th and 10.
Don't say
Their
these
game
things.
on the line.
Don't say these things.
Game on the line.
He's going to be like, suck next year and draft
I'm
you
not
out
saying
number
that.
1.
I'm just saying you talk about the risk, and there is risk. There's no doubt. But there's also risk in continuing to win 9 or 10 games every year. And Geno's been the quarterback here for 3 years. You have yet to win a playoff game during that time. You're going to be on your 3rd offensive coordinator and your 2nd head coach. If he threw more picks than anyone, more than 2 people last year. If I just gave you those facts and nothing else, you would say this is the easiest call of all time. Now, there are a lot more things to mitigate them, but that's a pretty compelling case right there.
Yeah, other than coaches and general managers tend to get contract extensions when you go to the playoffs.
That's true. I do get that. That's all right.